All right. Well, David, let's talk about chillin' nitrogen. So tell me about the origin of this concept.
Yeah, this brand started back in 2012. The founder, Danny Golick, was just graduated from the University of Florida, taking a year off to study for his MCATs. And while he was studying, one of his buddies recommended they go up to the northern part of Florida where there was somebody pouring liquid nitrogen into a bowl of cream, whisking it, and turning it into ice cream. And this is back in 2011. So this is some
Wow.
time ago. He came down here and started tinkering and was convinced that this could be something that could really resonate with the Miami consumer. Approached his father and mother and said, "Hey, I have some bad news. I'm thinking about putting off medical school. The good news is that I'm thinking about starting a business." And he comes from a family of entrepreneurs. They helped fund the first store back in 2012. It opened in Pinecrest, Florida. It is
Mm.
still open today, 13 years later. And from then, it just started really blossoming. And 7 years after opening that first location, they had 5 or 6 locations. They really started thinking to themselves, we really would like to now start considering franchising. And that's how they connected with me. And so
Well,
I come from a franchising background, and that we've been on this journey since 2019.
awesome. So, David, what were you doing before this?
Yeah, so I have a pretty extensive background in franchising, more than 20 years plus, really at a corporate level for a lot of big multinational brands like Burger King, Arby's, Wendy's, Pet Supplies Plus, and a couple other brands, really doing domestic and international franchising work. So franchise
Hmm.
development, really looking for private equity groups to sell either distressed stores or helping entrepreneurs expand their portfolios and broaden their portfolios into growing. At the time, to be honest with you, I was looking at maybe figuring out a way to stay here in Miami. I was going to be a father, and I got presented to Danny and Donna, and we sat down. I loved the concept at the time. The quality was amazing. The technology that they were using to kind of help create consistency, which is a huge plus in the franchising space, was something that
Sure.
I was really impressed with. And obviously, the unit level economics was something that I was really, really enthralled by. So that's kind of how we started talking. And next thing you know, we kind of went on this crazy journey. And starting the franchise in 2019, little did we know we were going to get stuck into COVID for a couple of years. But shortly after COVID was over, it's really started expanding pretty rapidly.
Wow. I love asking CEOs, especially that come into a company, what possessed them to come in, into that brand and, what drew them in. Clearly the technology that this was not your typical ice cream concept, the innovation of it all was something that drew you, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, I think whenever you're thinking about a franchise concept, and for any of your listeners thinking about either franchising their own concept or thinking about becoming multi unit operators of maybe a franchise that they're currently a part of, you really want to make sure that something's scalable, right? And
Sure.
so whenever you start kind of removing a little bit of that human interaction and figuring out ways to automate things, you now start having better reports, better readings, better control of your costs. And remember, in the restaurant space, waste is something that we're all struggle with. And so we've now been able to automate all of the dispensing of the cream and the bases into the bowls,
Hmm.
and we've been able to automate the dispensing of the nitrogen, the mixing of the nitrogen, mixing of the mixers. So there's been a lot of automation that we've introduced since I joined, but that's one of the things that drew me to this brand. I mean, Danny's been a tinkerer, really, really focused on the technology side. And so he's always been tinkering on how to make it faster. One of the good things about our brand is that we make every single cup made to order right there in front of you. So we like to say that we're basically a neighborhood ice cream factory. We craft every cup to order with liquid nitrogen, and we use, very rich flavors. We can do large scale events. We can make desserts for businesses. We do birthday parties. So at the end of the day, there's a lot of things that you can customize in our experience. And so it's really important to maybe to embrace technology where you can to help
Hmm.
that process.
Wow. Look, I've never met Danny. I've never spoken to him, but I can tell, first of all, he's a really smart guy because most founders have a hard time getting out of their own way when they franchise their concept. They think it's their baby and they need to do everything. But the fact that Danny brought you in even so early and realized that he's the tinkerer, as you put it, and needing somebody in franchising, that was a brilliant move. So he kind of got out of his own way early. Tell me a
Yeah.
little bit about the beginning. Did you have a concern coming into his business on was he really going to let go, or how did that whole conversation go?
Yeah, it's interesting. At the time, Danny and his mother kind of were getting to that point where they already had a portfolio of company stores. They really wanted to grow, but it just seemed like the infrastructure that they had was kind of maxed out for company growth at the moment. They just had so much interest from outside people, either wanting to license, wanting to grow. And so franchising was definitely a route. They went to an emerging franchisor conference in Philadelphia, which is a great conference every year for those of you interested in maybe franchising your concept.
Springboard.
The Springboard. That's right.
Uh-huh.
That's right. The Fisher Group. So one of the things that they came out of there saying is that it's probably best to try to find somebody who has experience doing this. And I gotta give Danny and Donna credit. One of the first conversations we had was just being very realistic about what they know and what they don't know. And also for me, right? What I'm
Sure.
really good at and what I'm not good at. And even to this day, we each have our own lane, right? So Danny kind of heads up operations and technology. His mother, who's also a partner and co-founder, heads up all the administrative, accounting, and all the vendor relationships. And I head up all the franchise relations, franchise sales, and all the development, And so it's been very, very good to kind of see how we all complement each other in this relationship.
So David, when you came in, had the company already franchised, or was that part of the role that you had to play in getting an FDD and getting it franchisable?
Yeah, so they had just completed an FDD. So they had just started that process of completing. So I came in at the tail end of them drafting that FDD. Not to get too into the weeds, but
Sure.
when I first met the family, I came in originally to head up all of their development. And within several months, it became clear to all of us that there were just a lot of aspects of the business that needed addressing. And while I come from the development side, my background is hardcore finance and accounting, and I have I have experience doing a couple different things. And so we decided to kind of, upgrade the role that I had.
Fantastic.
And so that's how I became the CEO of the company. And yeah, but definitely there was an FDD, early draft, an FDD.
Right.
But they just hadn't started selling any franchises, haven't started really that process yet.
Okay. So what's life like when you start up, the company's franchised now. Tell me about the beginning of the franchise itself.
Well, the beginning of the franchise, I can tell you, was unlike any experience I've ever had, partly due to the fact that we had to pretty much close everything down shortly after with COVID, right?
Oh, gosh, that's right.
So the franchising division really was put on freeze for a couple years while we focused on operating our stores, our company stores. Now we had to pivot extremely quickly. We went from doing delivery, and 9% of our business was delivery, to almost 75% of our business was delivery, up to 70% of our business during the COVID years. So, revamping the website, introducing delivery partners, really kind of changing the entire operational structure so that nobody was allowed to come into the store. And we brought the counter to the front of the store in all of our locations. There was just a huge focus. But what ended up happening is luckily our sales increased during COVID. Increased, our performance increased. And granted, we had a lot of headaches just like everyone else.
Sure.
But it also drove a lot of people down to Florida. And a lot of people from all over the country were coming to Florida for a variety of different reasons. But they started asking themselves, wait a minute, this brand looks like a great brand. They're making custom ice cream. They have non-dairy bases. They have gluten-free options. They have a lot of things. And you're just basically having a Chipotle experience with ice cream.
Right.
And we don't have something like that back in my hometown. So we ended up selling a ton of franchises, believe it or not, right after the vaccine came out. So we ended up selling a ton of franchises, and it's been great getting the brand out there. But it wasn't all rosy. It wasn't a rosy path to get there. That's for sure.
It never is. Right. It never is.
I'll share just a quick story if you mind me. It's been a tough road at the beginning. We had a family office approach us about potentially becoming franchisees of the system. And for a small brand like us, it was just so humbling and obviously so exciting to see someone who was willing to put millions of dollars to help grow the brand. And we spent quite a bit of time doing it, but that discussion turned into them wanting to make an investment in the parent company. And unfortunately, what it ended up doing was it just ended up sucking so much time, effort, and money out of everything we were doing that deal, after several months, really just died. And so I'm actually telling this story to be a warning for anybody out there in the franchising space that really try not to take off take your focus off the fact that singles and doubles are really what you should be focusing on in the first couple years. Those home runs can come later. But honestly, singles and doubles are really what's going to get you to that next stage where you can start maybe considering some bigger deals.
Thank you for tuning into the Emerging Franchise Brands podcast. For additional insights, guest applications, and to stay connected, visit us at efbpodcast.com. The Emerging Franchise Brands podcast is for entertainment purposes only, and the views expressed do not necessarily represent those of Emerging Franchise Brands, its host Frank Fumey, or Emerging Franchise Group, LLC. Any discussed franchise or investment opportunity requires thorough investigation, obtaining proper disclosure documents, and expert consultation before making any investment decisions. The podcast and its host do not offer professional advice or endorsements, and they hold no responsibility for actions, representations, accuracy, or consequential damages related to the podcast content.